You're here with Joan Jerkovich, your life coach on News Radio 1150 KSAL. And this is one of those commentaries where I tell my mother to turn the radio off because I'm going to tell you something about friends with benefits. Let me define that for you. This is one of those friendships where the benefits are typically a non-exclusive but recurring sexual or lots of, pretty heavy near sexual activities. This, as defined, is where the bonds and commitments in friendships with benefits aren't as deep as those in a romantic love relationship, but are more than one of those with just casual sex. But still a relationship with a friend where, yes, you have a sexual relationship as well. Now, this is actually pretty common with people in their 20s, where it's said that over 50% of kids in their 20s have had this kind of relationship with a friend, at least one friend with benefits they can recall. But it's also relatively common with mature people who are both married and they want to take their friendship to another level. They want a sexual relationship, but they don't want a commitment. They don't want another relationship. They don't even want to get out of their marriage. They have this kind of side friend with side benefits. Now, how really do people fall into or find themselves in these kinds of relationships? Well, it's probably not too surprising for you to hear, but they're all about avoiding commitment. And I have to say they're all about an easy booty call. Come on, let's get real. But the commitment issue is the biggest piece of it because these two people go into this relationship where, number one, they don't have any expectations. That's a big part of it. It's kind of one of those open relationships where don't ask, don't tell. Yes, we have a friends with benefits relationship, but if you're off with someone else, I just don't want to hear about it. Out of sight, out of mind. Another piece of what really seems to work with these kinds of relationships is that they have a set time frame, meaning they usually don't want to go more than a few months. And I have to say, doing my research on this, because I've never been in one of these kinds of relationships, you can believe that or not, but it seems kind of sad to me that you just kind of put a limit on your friendship to 3 months if you get into this sort of relationship. But that is what they say. Not only limit how long this relationship goes on, but another point is limit the amount of time that you spend with this person. No more than 2 hours a day. Talk on the phone only once or twice a week. These types of friendships seem to be all about keeping things at arm's length. Another thing that helps avoid the commitment in this sort of relationship is don't do the pillow talk. Don't get into these deep emotional issues. And there's no sleepovers allowed. Now, if you want to stay tuned to the end of my show, I'm going to be talking about some super funny, hilarious things that I saw a writer put up about the relationships with friends with benefits. And if you dare, you want to stay tuned for those later on, where there's a pretty funny point they made about the no sleepover rule. Supposedly, this isn't about romance. It's not about relationship. It's one of those situations where this is a friend who's not Mr. or Ms. Right, but Mr. Right now. One of the conditions of these types of relationships is that they are temporary. Don't expect them to go long term. Now, that's not to say that that can't happen. And I think you're going to hear this with my caller coming up because he is recognizing that this is sort of how she's treating the relationship, but he's desperately in love with her. I love to hear these men talk about their heart and their love, even if it's unrequited. So be sure you listen to that caller coming up. He's feeling basically hurt that this relationship is this sort of friends with benefits and not something more, something deeper, which is what he wants. And that's one of the problems with these kinds of relationships. When one of the party, one of the two, wants it to be something more. Of course, they have a sexual, physical relationship. That's going to strengthen certain bonds. And so that does make sense that one or the other or both could eventually fall in love. Another thing, though, that happens with these sometimes is if you have the partner who's just kind of, nope, that's not what I want and that's not what this is, then the bombshells happen when they all of a sudden show up with this alternative partner. Yet, in these kinds of arrangements and agreements, that's supposedly okay. I'm just here until you find that Mr. or Ms. Right. That's when the scenario is send out the bombers and drop the bombs. It's a bombshell to all of a sudden get dropped, even though this was the agreement you both had. Now, no surprises here that the research about these relationships show that the men are more focused on the benefits of the relationship, the sexual part of the relationship, and women are more focused on the friendship. As that is the more typical case, I think my caller coming up is even more interesting for all of us to hear because that's the flip-flop in his situation. He's the one who wants the relationship, and she's the one who's keeping it more at arm's length. And as is very common with these kinds of relationships, they happen after they have been lovers and in a romantic relationship for a period of time, but something just wasn't sustaining, and they decided to take a break, and then they sometimes will come back together, having, of course, had a physical relationship before, but they're not sure about a real romantic or commitment. Commitment's that key word again. They're not sure about the commitment, so they get into this position of friends with benefits. Now, where we talk about these being the no strings attached, no questions asked relationships, those are usually only relative to the sexual part of this relationship because friends need to share and need to talk on a deeper level. But that topic is off limits when it involves others. While this type of relationship sounds good in theory, they often fail in real life. And that's what you're going to hear from my caller, Mike, coming up. But next, we're going to talk to Carrie, who has some serious concerns about her boyfriend's addictive personality. That's coming up on the Joan Jerkovich Show here on News Radio 1150 KSAL.